Hi, Italia Autos here. Welcome back to another video on my channel. In this video I'm going to be giving you a buyer's guide on the Alfa Romeo 939 Spider, which I have behind me. Now this video is a buyer's guide. I am not telling you everything goes wrong with this car not to buy one. They are pretty reliable cars. Just going to be telling you the regular faults that I found on them over the last 10 years of working on them. Now the Brera or the Spider was originally introduced at the Geneva Motor Show in 2005 and was in production in the UK from 2006 to 2010, but you could still buy some of the last models right up until 2011. The engines that you could purchase with the vehicle were a 2.4 diesel, a 2.2 petrol, a 3.2 petrol, which was also available in four-wheel drive. And from 2008 onwards you could get a 1.75 TBI petrol engine, and you could also get a 2-litre diesel engine. Now in the UK there weren't very many of these sold, so they are the sought after versions. My personal preference is the 2.4 diesel because it gets lots of power and it is quite a reliable engine. Now there was only just under 12,500 of these produced in the world and very rare on UK's roads. So here's a few tips on what to look out for when you are purchasing a vehicle. Start with the front end. The whiskers at the front of the car can become loose and they can fall off. As you can see, it has happened already on the passenger side. The same with the front grills. They can become loose and fall off. They're not expensive to replace, so don't worry about the costs on those. Front badges with all Alfas, because of the complicated design and lots of colours, they do tend to fade and flake off, but again they are cheap to replace. This vehicle is fitted with aftermarket 19-inch Giulia quadrifoglio alloys. They do fit the car quite nicely, but there were several other alloys available in 17-inch form, 18-inch and 19-inch form, all relatively easy to get hold of. Some of the 18-inch and 19-inch wheels were quite soft, so if you went over a pothole quite hard, you were quite liable to crack them or damage them. The wing mirrors in most of the Breras and the Spiders are electrically folding, so just make sure that both of those wing mirrors fold in, because if you do need a replacement wing mirror, it will cost you around £100. The tail lights on the Breras and the Spiders are quite prone to letting water in when they age. There is a seal around the back of the light which can go quite brittle and start to let water in. Also the fixing points for the headlights, I think there's four 13mm nuts, and the fixing points in the headlights are quite weak, so they can sometimes break, meaning the headlight's loose and the seal doesn't get a good fit. So just make sure that you don't have any water ingress, because rear lights can be quite expensive, anything between sort of £100 and £150 to replace one unit. There are parking sensors on pretty much, I think, all the UK cars. You do suffer with the sensors failing sometimes, but they are no more than £20 each for a used sensor. The rear valance on the bottom of the rear bumper is quite a delicate thing. It can suffer with heat damage where the exhaust gets too hot, either because the heat shield's moved or it's had an aftermarket exhaust on it, and you can melt the exhaust all around there, so make sure that that's not melted because they are quite costly to find replacements for. The inside of the car is a nice, comfortable place to be. You don't tend to find many rattles or issues with bits of trim falling off. They are quite robust on the inside. The only things which do tend to fail are these heater vents. They can sometimes fall apart if they're knocked because they are quite delicate. You just need a little pull tool to pull them out and replace them. Again, replacement shouldn't cost you any more than, say, £15. The vehicle's stereo isn't the best. Most versions do come with a USB cable in the glove box, but again you would probably want to think about ripping that out and putting in an aftermarket doubled-in stereo in there. I wouldn't recommend upgrading to the optional sat-nav unit because it is not a direct swap and you do need cables and things like that to get it working. So do purchase an aftermarket one rather than getting the sat-nav one. One other little fault you can sometimes have inside the vehicle is the buttons on the end of the stalks. You see you've got a button up and down button there, and you've also got one here and one here. They can sometimes fail, but it's not expensive to get a replacement stalk nowadays. The boot release switch is in the glove box just down here in the corner. There is also an emergency pull cord in the back here, which you just need to yank and that will open the boot. Now, the engine fitted in this is the 2.4 20 valve diesel. This is the 210 brake horsepower one, if I remember rightly. They are quite nice engines. They are my preferred engine out of all of them because they are fairly easy to maintain. They do have a few regular problems, which I will go over with you now. The power steering pumps are prone to fail. The bearings can fail, or the internal pump can start to fail and it won't pump the fluid around correctly, and it will sort of sound like you've got no fluid in the car. Again, if you're having power steering noises, there is a filter inside here which can become dislodged and it can start to block the pipe, so that can also present a power steering type noise. The power steering racks on these are also liable for leaking, but again, they're not difficult to replace and they're not that expensive to purchase. You're probably looking around £300 for another used rack fitted. There is a power steering pipe which comes out of here and goes across the engine down to the back of the steering rack. Now that pipe is liable to fail and start to leak, so you can get another one of those from the dealer, which they are quite expensive, or you can get a used one for around £80. The engines themselves do require a cam belt every 4 years or 48,000 miles. Some people say 5 years, I tend to say 4 years. A few little issues you can have down here. The swirl flaps behind the engine on the intake manifold, which are just down behind here, they can sometimes start to leak. So when the vehicle is next to your cam belt, I would definitely think about getting those swirl flaps deleted. Just check the fuel pipes as well, because they can sometimes get some diesel leaks. The injectors are normally fairly robust. They don't tend to seize into the engine as common as some of the Vauxhall units, but you can sometimes get the O-ring for the injectors to fail and it will start to blow through the seal, and you will get a build-up of black sort of tarry stuff or diesel leaking out of there. You can also get a leak from these rubber pipes, so just make sure that nothing is leaking from there. There are a couple of nightmare jobs to do on the engine. The worst one I tend to find is the alternator. It's all down there in the deepest, darkest depths of the engine, so you do have to pretty much remove the whole front end of the car to get to it. And you also have to remove the engine mount and higher and lower the engine to get some of the bolts out. All the engines on these Alfas nowadays, like in most cars available, are fitted with dual mass flywheels. As this is a very torquey engine, they do tend to fail around the 80,000 mile mark. You are probably looking at between sort of £800 and £1,000 to have a new clutch and dual mass flywheel fitted into one of these. Cam belt wise, I would pay around £300 to £400 for a cam belt to be done on one of these, and always get the water pumps changed with the cam belt because they tend to fail. Another weak point while I've got the bonnet open is the wiper linkages. The plastic ends are mounted into metal, so if you're trying to lift heavy snow off the windscreen or you're trying to yank them to remove them to put some new blades on, they are very easy to snap the wiper linkages, so just be very delicate with it if you are trying to change your wiper blades. Now, the biggest Achilles heel with these Spiders are the hoods. There is a problem with these where you get water ingress into the hood ECU, and that will completely and utterly ruin your ECU. There are some people that have sent them off to get them repaired, but most people don't know how to repair them, and you can't get a used one or a new one for love nor money. So do make sure that your hood is working properly. There are a few other little problems which you can get with your hood. On the rear load cover, the tonneau cover, there are some flat motors which cover the roof holes once it's down. They do tend to fail every now and again, and they're around £100 each to replace. So again, just make sure that your roof operates perfectly fine when you're using it. Now on to chassis issues and steering and suspension. Brake pads and brake discs are quite cheap and easy to replace. The rear calipers can sometimes seize, but again, used ones are only around £30. The front subframes on these vehicles are pretty much made of cheap metal, and they do tend to rust away if you leave the under trays on. So if you have a vehicle and you can't see the subframe when you're looking at it, I'd probably have a good inspection of that subframe just to make sure that it's not got any holes in it. The springs on these vehicles are very prone to snapping, either at the top of the spring, in the middle, or at the bottom. So just get underneath the vehicle and have a look at each spring and make sure that it's not broken. They're not that difficult to replace, but on some of the sportier models the springs are a little bit rarer to get hold of. The Y piece of the exhaust does tend to rust away, but you can get a replacement part for around £90. Let's try and show you the front subframes now. The front bar which goes along the front, that is quite prone to rusting away. As you can see, there is some surface rust on that. So it is advisable, if it's in that sort of condition, to get it refurbished to get you through a few more winters. Also, the actual chassis sort of legs of the subframe are prone to rusting, and that's why I do recommend removing the under tray, because water does sit against the legs and it just rusts it away. Upper and lower wishbones can be quite expensive to purchase. A lower wishbone can be around £150 plus fitting, and upper wishbones vary from sort of £70 up to sort of £110. There are several variants of the upper wishbones, but the bottom wishbones are the same throughout all models. And if you're buying the Q4 version of the Brera or the Spider, do inspect the subframes thoroughly, because they are very hard to get hold of, as they're unique to the four-wheel drive versions. So there you go, that was my quick buyer's guide on the Alfa Romeo Spider. Hopefully it was thorough enough for you to save you a few problems when you are going to look at a vehicle. So thanks for watching, hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and if you have enjoyed it, please give it a like and also consider subscribing. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next video.